anybody remember the 3 or 4 biggest failings of the educational system, collective educational system from the
finance.
from the finance?
I remember the reviews, but I can't recall the
There were 4 great failings of the educational system. One is personal finance, right? We don't get any educational personal finance.
Career was one?
Career, right? No advice on what we should actually do with our lives.
Nutrition. No.
You said
he added one.
you added civics.
Yeah.
I would call that civics, or you could also call it civil rights. I think that's a good one, by the way. That's not wasn't in my original 3.
Yeah.
Well, the other one is personal health.
Yeah.
That's a great failing in our educational system. We don't get any education about personal health, right? So that's where this fits in. This fits into personal health. And this is something, it's a great, great topic, meditation. It's all about personal health. And it's not taught in any schools. And, well, it depends on your view of the world on whether or not it's taught in schools. But generally speaking, personal health is absent from our educational system as a topic, as a focus topic. It's generally just not there. And I went through a phase, I'm a health freak, so I'm always trying to, improve my personal health, and that's just part of my personality, essentially. And if you are interested in that topic, meditation will always get enter as a theme. Like if you pick up any sort of personal health book, meditation will come up as a theme in the book. Like you need to learn how to meditate, blah, blah, blah. So that got me interested because I read a lot of books on personal health. I thought, I've heard this so many times now, I'm going to figure out how to meditate. I'm going to figure out what is meditation about and all that stuff. But actually it's very difficult to find good pedagogy on meditation. It's not easy, actually. In fact, I'm going to grab some water right now. So that's now. So in about in the year 2015-ish, I had a personal resolution. One of my New Year's resolutions was to figure out meditation and incorporate it into my daily life. And like I do, I go through different phases. And when I go through a phase, I end up reading a lot about it because I'm like, an academic. So I read something like 10 books on the topic of meditation from all these different people. And there are lots of different kinds of meditations and so on. So I can just give a brief introduction based on my experience. The one thing that I can add to the existing 10 books that other people can't add are diagrams and visuals, like visual aids to meditation. So you pick up a book on meditation, there are usually no diagrams, nothing visual, just pure text. So I can add something there. And I can also add, being an academic, classification of meditation techniques. So I know I classify them in my head in 4 different categories, and I can share that. So it starts with a personal experience. I don't remember what year it was, and this is very, very typical, by the way. This is very, very typical, I think. I went to Seattle. I think the year was probably something like, I wish I could remember what year it was. Maybe 2004 or 5 or something like that. My brother lives in Seattle, and he said, and I was also visiting with my other brother, so the 3 of us were visiting. Well, 2 of us flew to Seattle to visit the one that lives there. And Tom, the one that lives there, said, "Oh, I've started practicing Buddhism." And I thought, oh, that's so cool. Like, how cool is that? I didn't know anything about Buddhism at the time, nothing. And he said, if you guys like, we can go visit a Buddhist center where I go every week, and you can experience what it's like to be in a Buddhist group, a weekly group. And I thought, definitely, like, that's so cool. Like, never was exposed to that in my whole life. And we went there, and there was a Buddhist monk leading the session. And he said at one point, okay, we're going to meditate now. And this was his way of leading. His way of leading meditation is like, in 30 seconds or something, at a specific time, we're going to start meditating. And then he said, just stop thinking. That was his instruction on how to meditate. Yeah, so he said, okay, we're going to count down, like starting in blah, blah, blah time. Just stop thinking. And I said, okay, that sounds like a fun exercise. Of course, I didn't say anything because there was a big group. So he counted down his timer and he said, we're going to meditate for 5 or 10 minutes or something like that. And that was his instruction, stop thinking. So we did that. And then I think everybody closed their eyes. And that is when I discovered something. Has anybody ever tried this exercise yet? Has anybody ever been told to stop thinking and try this exercise? Well, you guys are cheating. Did you try this exercise outside of the, before you met me, so to speak?
No, not before.
No, it was because, yeah, that's cheating. So that's where it all starts. So nobody else has ever tried that before, besides Carlo and Aleph, yeah? Somebody just points at you and says, stop thinking.
Stop talking a lot.
Yeah.
Not much.
What you discover when you try that exercise, so you stop thinking for a few seconds, but then you start thinking again. So what you discover is that you can't stop thinking. That's what you discover from that exercise. So that was the day I discovered, like, I couldn't stop thinking. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I can't stop thinking. That is sort of the basis of all meditation. That discovery of not being able to stop thinking is the basis of all, I would say it's the basis of all meditation, and it's the basis of all spirituality, actually. So it starts with the recognition that you have two kinds of thoughts. You have voluntary, actually it's part of my classification. You have voluntary thought, and you have involuntary thought. And that is a huge discovery already. That's like, the first time I heard that, I was like, wow, that's a big discovery, like that I have involuntary thoughts. Like if you're hearing this for the first time, it's like, it's a big thing. Like, wow, I have involuntary thoughts. And it gets even more interesting. The more you like analyze your own thoughts or look at your own thoughts, the more you realize that 90% or more of all your thoughts are involuntary, actually. So if I ask Muhammad, like, which day was he born on, he will think, yeah? And that's voluntary thoughts. But even after he's thought about that, his thoughts will continue involuntarily. And you discover that by this exercise. The other way to discover this is by the exercise, stop thinking. Yeah? You can't just stop thinking. You can't do it. right? So here's where the viz visual aids come in. Let's make this blue. I don't know if blue and red are the best colors for this, maybe. I'm gonna try to draw a blue circle. And I'm trying to draw a red circle on top. So this is where the viz stuff comes in, which I think is very, very helpful. So there are two circles here, actually. They're right on top of one another. The red one represents your mind. And your mind is occupied 90% or more of the time with involuntary thought, actually. And I'm going to draw that like this. And I'm going to draw like little letters. I'll just draw the... So I'm drawing the mind activity as a circle. It's got like this circular pattern, and then there are letters there which represent that your thoughts are usually expressed in a language, right? Like English. Your thoughts are usually words, yeah, and they're tightly connected to your language center. So that's why I put the A, B's, and C's and D's on there. Now, if you try, a good meditation exercise is, well, the mouse hole one, which I mentioned, which is just stop thinking. I'll explain that a little bit more a little bit later. But a good meditation exercise is take a piece of paper and a pen and just say, okay, I'm going to write down the thoughts that occur in my mind. So a better way of expressing that is thoughts occur to you. You are not thinking. Thinking happens to you, actually. It's just like your breathing. You can breathe voluntarily. I can take a breath in when I want to. I can breathe out when I want to. But 99% of my breathing is automatic. It's the same with the thought process. You want the breathing to be automatic. Yeah, you don't want to die, like because you forgot to breathe. Right? So all of these systems in our bodies are automatic. You know, respiration, digestion, circulation, the nervous system, and the thought process. So it's good that it's automatic or semi-automatic. A great exercise is to take out a piece of paper and just write down which thoughts occur to you. It's a free-flowing exercise. You just sit and you just wait. And you say, okay, I'm just going to write down whichever thoughts come into my head. It's a great exercise. I encourage everybody to try it. It's fun. And you'll notice a few things if you do this exercise. You'll notice that the thoughts are very noisy. That means they seem to be quite random. They're not completely random, but they seem to be quite random. Like you'll be thinking, why did I just think about that? Why did that thought just pop into my head? And your mind will wander in a million different directions. It seems random, it's not completely random. So that's one thing you'll recognize. It's very noisy. You'll also notice that it's very fast. You won't be able to write down everything. because the thoughts will be going too quickly. Yeah. You'll also notice that it is periodic or cyclical. It doesn't fit very well on the board. That means you'll find out that certain thoughts repeat themselves. So you'll be writing down your thoughts and you'll be like, oh, that one already came and went and there it goes again. So they will come and go and come and go. And that is, you experience that in your own life, right? Remember, like, you wake up in the morning to a song, and the song is stuck in your head for who knows how long, hours or even days, but probably like a few hours. So noisy, fast, periodic. And you'll also discover that the thoughts are associated with an energy. I would say they are so associated with an energy. I'm going to draw that like this. And perhaps my color coding is not the best choice. Anybody here red-blue colorblind? Positive and negative. So your thoughts have an energy, because that's all we are. We're just energy. Right? That's what we are. And you'll discover that your automatic thinking is associated with a lot of negative energy, actually. This is where the health aspect comes in. The negative thoughts can generally be classified, this is the classification, this isn't the only classification, but the negative automatic thoughts can usually be classified, not always, into two categories, if I can spell it correctly. Perceived past and perceived future. This is fun. Anybody think this is fun? I think this is fun. Anybody know what perceived past is called? Another word for that?
Memory?
Yes, memory. Yes, definitely. Your thoughts will often take the form of perceived pasts. And a big theme in there is regret. That's the negative part. You'll have a lot of automatic perceived past thoughts that take on the form of regret. It's a negative, it's an unhealthy, essentially what it is it's an unhealthy noise in your head. That's essentially what it is.
Fear also.
The fear part, I would argue, falls into the perceived future.
Okay.
You are afraid of something, but you're not afraid of something in your perceived past generally. You're afraid of something in your perceived future. That's also called worry, you know. Perceived past is often associated with regret, and perceived future is often associated with worry. I am worried about this. You hear me say that a lot, right? So this is where the health comes in. You put these things together, involuntary thought, you notice these characteristics. Noisy, it's not healthy. Fast is not really very healthy either. Periodic, okay, that doesn't really matter that much. But perceived past and perceived future, so perceived past being regret, perceived future, this is where most of my unhealthy thoughts come from, perceived future. in the forms of worry. Like, these things don't do you any, they don't, well, arguably, they served their purpose for a long time and helped us survive. Like, these were necessary mechanisms to help us survive. But now, it's not, we're not in survival mode right now in terms of like getting food, clothing, and shelter. Those problems are solved. You know, we don't need that anymore. So the question is, how can we make ourselves healthier? Like, knowing this, how do we make ourselves healthier? And that's what meditation is about. Meditation is about, in my opinion, turning off the noise or dampening the noise, the mental noise in your head. That's and like putting a damper on the negative automatic energy. That's by the way, those involuntary thoughts have other names, by the way. One name is called the ego. A lot of literature calls this the ego. Another name is the voice in the head. There are probably some other names that I can't remember. So this is like, this involuntary thought you can think of, you can notice, it's like a voice in your head that never stops talking. Yeah. And now let's get back to the mind. And so there's the red circle and the blue circle. Does anybody have any questions or comments so far? Everybody's fascinated by this. It's the drawings that make it like kind of interesting, I guess. There are two circles here. And my definition, so if you ask people what is your definition of meditation, you will get a different answer from a lot of people. And a lot of books actually never define what meditation actually is. The most common definition I have encountered is the ability to stop thinking, or just an exercise to stop thinking. But that's impossible. You can't not just stop thinking. So what is it? I have to draw it to get to the definition. I'll draw. That's supposed to be actually the same. So now I've drawn the two circles, but they are a little bit separated. So this is where my taxonomy comes in. Explicit, implicit, and then there's voluntary, and you could say involuntary. I guess involuntary. I probably should have written that a little bit lower. So the first explicit voluntary meditation exercise is the stop thinking one. Stop thinking. That's a form of meditation. It's explicit. Well, actually, maybe it's implicit. Let's put it over onto the implicit. Because you don't know that it's a form. What I mean by implicit is you don't know it's a form of meditation. Now, what happens with the stop thinking exercise is you will stop thinking for like a few seconds. If I say stop thinking, you'll just wait for a few seconds, and then your mind will kick in. So that few seconds that transpires between the time I say stop thinking and the automatic thoughts that come back. So it creates separation. So this red circle is the mind and the mind of activity, right? That's what that represents. The blue circle represents that other thing that notices that there's a period of time where you're not thinking. You know what I mean? So something else has to exist to notice that you've stopped thinking for a few seconds. Otherwise, you couldn't observe that you stopped thinking for a few seconds. And the question is, what is this thing that observes and notices that you've stopped thinking for a few seconds? That's the big question. Like, what is that blue circle? So you could call it a few different things. You could call it attention. So you focus your attention somewhere, either on your mind or not on your mind. You could call it consciousness. You could call it spaciousness. You could call it stillness. You could call it presence. You could call it being. There are lots of different words for that other circle.
Is it self-awareness?
I don't usually call it that,
No.
because then you have to define what is self.
Alright.
I was going to write down another word. Oh yes, formless. Formless. You could call it formless. So meditation, in my opinion, the definition of meditation is the recognition of these two circles. There are two, I don't want to say things, because this is not a thing. It's pointing to the opposite of what thing is. It's the opposite of a thing. So these are all opposites of, even though it's hard to describe. But presence or being or formless or stillness or space, the space is the opposite of a thing. It's not a thing like space. It's no thing. That's another word you could write down here. It's no thing. So like objects have to have, well they don't have to, but objects have an opposite, a duality. We wouldn't know that space existed unless there were objects in space. So I'm going to draw another picture. And meditation is the practice of separating these two circles. This is meditation. The practice of separating your mind, your involuntary thoughts, from your being. I'll call it being. That is meditation. That's what meditation is. Can you separate your attention from your involuntary thought? That is what meditation is. That's my definition of meditation. And it's consistent with all the books that I've read. There are lots of different books. There are, endless books on meditation. I've only read like 10, something like that. And you have lots of different ways to achieve this. Some of them are explicit, some of them are implicit, some of them are voluntary, some of them are involuntary. Has anybody heard of transcendental meditation? That's just one way to meditate. So you can buy books on transcendental meditation. That's an explicit, voluntary process, activity, if you will. And the whole point of all these meditation exercises, so normally, in the normal state, your normal sort of conscious state, all of your attention is directed towards your mind or your involuntary thoughts. So I've tried to draw attention, and it has a direction. All the other activities take the attention and try to put it somewhere else. So, for example, the body, you could draw different parts of the body. I don't have to draw it. So another explicit voluntary meditation that you've probably heard about is breathing. You've probably all heard of breathing exercises as a form of meditation. That is taking your attention away from your involuntary thoughts and directing it towards your stomach, your breathing, and your lungs, and your body. So there are lots of them that are sensory. So breathing, I would say breathing is a sensory meditation exercise, but you can also have meditation that's based on your sight. What are the other senses? Hearing.
Taste, I like taste meditation.
Yeah. That and kinesthetic. Kinesthetic, that means feeling. It's not showing up very well. Those smart guys stop using that one. So, I'm hoping that this is legible. Smart guys are better than does it work? Oh, that one works. Kinesthetic. That's supposed to say kinesthetic. So there are lots of different kinds of meditation and ways to achieve this, and that's we won't have time to go into all the details. I could do a part 2 that's just different meditation techniques. And when you try these exercises, for example, somebody says, okay, I want you to focus on your breathing. You'll find out that this is very challenging, actually. You discover that this is very challenging. What happens is, you direct your attention to your breathing for some seconds, and then it gets drawn, your attention gets drawn back to your involuntary thoughts, actually. You wake up, and you're like, oh wow, I'm thinking again. Like, so the process of meditation is really this, it's a back and forth between attention directed to something else other than your involuntary thoughts, or your involuntary thoughts, but your attention always gets drawn back to your involuntary thoughts. And basically what happens is you wake up and you redirect your attention to something like your breathing, and then you fall asleep again, go back to involuntary thought, you wake up again. That's another way to say, like, waking up and sleep, because these are two levels of consciousness. This is often referred to different levels of consciousness. Like, if all of your attention is directed to your involuntary thought, that's often referred to as being unconscious. You're awake and unconscious at the same time. And this one is being awake and conscious. And this is also referred to as something else. Anybody ever? Enlightenment. This is what enlightenment refers to. Being awake and conscious at the same time. This is like being awake and in a dream-like state. When you start to pay attention to this, it becomes very obvious. Because you look around and you notice that most people are in a dream-like state. They have no awareness of what's going on around them. They're focused on their phones or thoughts in their head, and they're asleep. They're like sleepwalkers.
I would name more as a bad trip than a dream-like state.
And this is
Like an autopilot.
autopilot. You could think of it as autopilot. And the idea is, why are we even talking about this is a healthier state to be in than this one? That's the point. Like, this is healthier, and this is not as healthy. Like, that's what we're here to try to, like, improve our health. That's the. And this state is based purely on our imagination. It's purely imaginary. That's what it's based on. And the meditation as a skill is to see, how long can I do this for? How long can I redirect my attention from my involuntary thoughts to something else, anything else. It doesn't have to be breathing. It could be based on your sight. There are the exercises for you that are based on vision. It could be based on hearing. A simple hearing one is, okay, I have a stopwatch. As soon as I hit the start button on the stopwatch, listen and identify every single thing you can hear. Everything. Distant noises, close noises, breathing, like everything. And that will take something like 10 seconds or 30 seconds. And those 30 seconds you redirect your attention from your involuntary thought to your hearing. That's a meditation. That's a simple meditation exercise. Because you've created this gap. You've created a gap between your attention and your involuntary thoughts. And that's a skill. This is a skill. And what happens is, the better you get at it, the healthier you are, actually. And I'm not saying I'm an expert at this, by the way. I'm not an expert. I just happen to read a lot about it. I do practice. But what happens is, after you meditate, you feel differently. You don't feel the same anymore. You feel more relaxed. You feel calm. You don't feel like you're worrying. You don't feel like you're regretting things. You're a healthier version of yourself. The way I think of it, actually, I think of the involuntary thoughts as like either a tumble dryer or a washing machine with lots of dirty laundry going in there really fast, quickly cycling through there. It's like you're taking that whole machine and submerging it in water. Suddenly that machine, which was wild and dirty, is calm and cleaner. It's calmer and cleaner. It can't spin so fast anymore if it's underneath the water. And it's a little bit cleaner. That's the best analogy I can think of. But you feel like you just feel better. You know, you feel like you're spiritually, or however you want it, cognitively, you're a healthier version of yourself. That's what ends up happening. And there's a lot of even scientific research to support this. So it's not just, it's not, people study this and try to actually quantify the health benefits. These are all fun, but like some of these are very fun too. The other categories, I'll just mention a few before I stop. I haven't given this talk yet because I wanted to like have a complete table before, but I haven't got around to it yet. But we could do a special visible lunch just on the table because it's so much fun to think of different ways to meditate because it's challenging. It's very challenging. So a fun one that anybody can do that's voluntary and implicit is any kind of balancing exercise. Any balancing exercise, it doesn't matter what it is. If you want to balance, you have to redirect your attention from your involuntary thoughts to gravity in your body. Do you remember when you were on the Swiss ball in my office? That's a balancing exercise. And while you're on the Swiss ball, your attention is focused on your balance. As soon as you focused your attention on your involuntary thoughts, you fell off. So that's an example. Another fun example, like anybody can think of meditation exercises. So, for example, just taking 2 feet and placing them in front of each other is kind of a meditation. Because if I don't focus right now, I will lose my balance and fall. So it's an involuntary, look, it's a voluntary, implicit meditation exercise. And if you want to, sometimes what happens is you get very good at something, or you're just like, oh, like, I can't stop thinking. I need a powerful technique to get me out of this, because sometimes you're completely identified with your thoughts. They're just completely overwhelming. And that's when it's really nice to have implicit. I did this wrong actually. So this is implicit. In some ways, you could also say that this is involuntary. I'm going to change the categorization. Because you have no choice. Like in the balancing, you don't have a choice. You could say it's voluntary because you're voluntarily balancing. But in the way I'm trying to think of this is, you don't have a choice on meditation in this one, otherwise you fall. That's what I'm trying to say about involuntary here. And if you want to make it even more involuntary, I don't know if anybody's ever tried something like this before, you just close your eyes. And then it becomes like a very, very strong meditation exercise. Like, you're really, like, you gotta do it, otherwise you fall over. Implicit voluntary, I would put prayer in there. So when you go to church and you pray, I would call that an implicit voluntary form of meditation. Because when you pray, you are redirecting your attention from your involuntary thoughts onto something else. I remember I used to date somebody that was very religious, and she invited her church group to the house. And I'm not a religious person. I would say I'm spiritual. I would say this is the basis of all spirituality. But I wouldn't call myself religious. We would call herself religious. She invited the church group to the house, and they wanted me to participate. So they said, "Bob, will you read this prayer to the group?" And I said, "Sure. That sounds like fun." And then I did it, and I discovered this is meditation. I've just redirected all of my thoughts from my involuntary thoughts to the environment around me. I was concentrating on my speech and the people around me not messing up, and just I was completely focused on what I was doing in that moment. There was no more room. I couldn't be thinking about the perceived past, and I couldn't be thinking, "Oh, this disappeared." So I actually think that prayer, the whole point of prayer is meditation to raise your health. That's how I see it, to increase your health. And there are so many more, like if I think about this more, like implicit, involuntary, like high intensity training. I don't know if anybody's ever studied high intensity training, but for a high intensity training exercise is just running as fast as you can for 50 meters. I don't know if you guys have ever tried that or something like that, or jumping a set of hurdles as fast as you can. I would argue that that's a kind of meditation, because you must redirect your attention from your involuntary thoughts to your environment in your body. You have no choice. Like, if you want to succeed at this, then you have to do that. So it's a kind of meditation. And if I had more time, I think I could fill up this whole board with different meditation exercises. That could be a different kind of visible lunch, because it's a great topic. I like to think of new. Ironically, I like to think of new. That's the voluntary thought, though. Of new meditation exercises. Yeah. Any questions? It's kind of a lot of. It's a lot of information.
So, there are a few like. Well, you remember because you introduced me to this stuff with the Power of Now last year. I was struggling for my masters because I couldn't get the work done. I couldn't sleep, and I was always thinking about negative.
Yeah.
So, after reading the book, what I started doing is just literally focusing on exactly what I was doing, like the next semicolon, the next day, the next P, the next code to a method or whatever. And I started working because it put me in a state of flow, which I would say is kind of meditative, right? Because you're separated from the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the main benefit for me wasn't that it made me relaxed, it was that it would get me the work done so that I would have nothing to worry about, so that I could sleep. So in that way it made me like
more productive.
healthier.
Yeah.
Because my main reason for not sleeping was worrying about the stuff that I had to do that I didn't do or that I didn't do poorly. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like it was more like maybe an indirect effect of it. The other thing that is like a complete opposite experience maybe. Because yes, I would agree that generally involuntary thought is negative and it's cyclical, it's noisy and fast, but at the same time, like I remember when I was cycling across Europe and I was cycling, 8 to 10 hours a day, and even if you have a mate, after the first 2 days you have nothing to talk about, you don't listen to music, you're just cycling. So it's not high intensity exercise. This is more of a marathon, and that becomes the involuntary bit. You just go, like you're not,
Yeah.
and you're alone with your mind. And I guess maybe because you just have to worry about where to sleep, eat and drink, you don't have much to worry about. But I thought that was healthy, like being alone with your thought for hours and hours and hours. But that would be the opposite of that. That would be being completely lost in the other direction. But I thought it was good for me.
It's definitely very healthy. Definitely very healthy. What ends up happening is like, ironically, in higher education, we are always engaged in mind-based activity. This is part of the equation. So our educational system has a very unhealthy aspect to it. Our educational system says, take your attention and direct it at your mind all the time. That you get rewarded. The whole educational system is like a reward system for taking your attention and directing it onto your mind activity. And you took your attention and directed it on experience. The experience of cycling. So a lot of your attention was focused on your body. A lot of it, not all of it, obviously.
Well, I think it starts that way, but then it declines because it becomes automatic. Like you're just doing that. You're not thinking about it. But I feel like the good thing for me was that I ran out of things to think about. Because if you're just thinking for 8 hours a day, every day, after a couple of days, you don't have anything anymore to think about. So it's either the same song stuck in your head for literally a couple of hours, not even a song, like a verse, or it's just random thoughts. And I think that's the main difference between the negative involuntary and the kind of neutral. The negative involuntary, I think, is because it's always thinking with an aim. Like you're either worrying about something or you're thinking about something you've done, while there is a kind of free thinking where you're not thinking for any reason, you're just thinking because you're there and doing it.
Yeah.
And that there's no worries, no memories, just what if. It's fun.
Yeah, it's very, very healthy. It's very healthy. And you're not adding more fuel. You're not really adding more fuel. When you're cycling, you're not adding more fuel. What a great way to add fuel is checking email.
Yeah.
Here's a new thing to worry about. You didn't do this.
No.
Here's a new thing to, like, this drives me crazy. I notice, like, oh, my email drives me crazy. And this is what's happening. It's injecting lots of past and future, perceived past and future into my mind. You didn't do this. You need to do that.
Yeah.
And when you're cycling, you're not getting that fuel. It's like running out. It's like running out of mind fuel in some ways.
You get a positive involuntary thought, which is quite nice.
Yeah, it's very healthy. Yeah, and that's another thing. That's why Barrett likes his trips to Antarctica so much.
Yeah, that's why
It shuts off from
when he
everything.
talked about it. That's the bit I could relate to. It's just you take away all the worries,
Yeah.
and you can just be alone with yourself for a while
Exactly.
and see what goes on.
It's a huge topic, obviously. This is a huge topic. I would say this is the basis of all religion and all spirituality, actually.
But even from a productive point of view, like because you said we do the most of what we do is mind-based activity, right? And this is not what we technically evolved to do. We evolved to hunt and eat normal animal stuff, right? And I'm thinking because you said it's like
It's
breathing,
true.
and
Yes.
I'm thinking the same way. I'm thinking the first thing they do when you do a sport, like if you're a footballer or a runner or whatever, they teach you how to breathe because your body is not made to do that. You're not a jogger. You're either sprinting for your life or you're not running for fun, right?
That's an interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
But I always thought like it's kind of like you need to learn how to breathe to do a certain series of things, right? And it seems weird that we do mind activity, but we don't learn how to control like the same way. That's the way I saw it.
Yeah, I think over. I don't know the last. I don't know 200-ish years or something like that. Our lifestyles used to have more of a balance of what I would think of as experiential activity And that's activity that's not necessarily mind focused. And reading is mind focused, or studying is mind focused. There was more of a balance. But now it's out of balance. All we do is mind-based activity. You go to school. I heard this amazing quote. I don't know who said it, but it's crazy. We spend the first 2 years teaching our children after they're born to walk, run, and speak. And then we spend the next 16 years telling them to sit down and shut up. So it's like, oh my gosh, it's true. like the balance now is out. Like it's all, our educational system is too much mind focused and not enough experiential. Like experiences point outside. You know, like you said, when you go outside and you cycle. Another way of saying that is you're engaging your sensory, your perceptions, your sensory systems. You go outside and you're engaging all of your senses, your sight. When you're really looking, if you're really looking at something properly, you should stop thinking. Like, if you really focus on something. So when you're cycling, you have to look. Otherwise you crash and you fall off balance.
Happened on 3 times.
There's some balancing in the cycling. So yeah, going outside and experiencing something. In order to experience something, what does that mean? You have to engage your senses, sight, hearing, and kinesthetics. You know, and that's redirecting your attention from your mind onto your senses. And that's healthy. And I think that we used to do that in a much better way. We used to focus our attention on our senses and our experiences, the outside world, much more and in a much more balanced way than we do today. Now all of our attention is focused on our inner worlds, our imagination, like just, fiction, essentially. It's a big topic. Like, it's huge. I could talk about this for days. Really, a lot of people do. People talk about this for days. You can go on meditation retreats. You can go somewhere for a week and just focus on this topic. In fact, so implicit voluntary. I put down singing bowl. Anybody know what a singing bowl is? Here's another one. Yoga. Yoga is implicit voluntary meditation. You're taking your attention away from your noisy mind and focusing it on the body. This is one of the reasons yoga is so healthy. There are so many activities. That's why I wanted to make this table before today, but I just didn't.
I will have more cooking.
Cooking, doing the dishes. That's kind of, now it does get a little bit tricky, but cooking. Another thing is there are kind of tools. There's another category, just called distraction. And then there are 2 subcategories, like healthy and unhealthy. But cooking is arguably, in some ways, it could possibly be put in here.
But wouldn't for most activities to classify as meditation need an element of challenge? Isn't that, because see, this is the thing, if I'm cooking something new, it's challenging because I don't know how to do it, so I'm focused. If I'm making pasta, whatever, I've done it 1,000 times, I can do it on autopilot, I can think about whatever. So, isn't the same with, say yoga, for instance, isn't it meditative because it's hard?
I'll put a question.
Like, you can't really do it without focusing on it. You gotta fall down.
That's right. It's like there's a mind side to cooking. Because you might have to think and you might be thinking about it. But there's also a sensory side of cooking where you're smelling, you're breathing, you're tasting. You know, anytime you're engaging the senses, that's healthy. You know, that's the healthy. But you could be cooking and completely thinking about something else too, based back in the mind. So it could go either way.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying
You know.
maybe that the challenge aspect would redirect more toward one side than the other.
It's for all of them. For example, while you're praying, you can think something else.
That's
It's
true,
like
that's
automatic,
true.
you know, you're doing it.
Like incense is like trying to take your attention out of your head and into your nose and into your environment. So it's not meditation, but it's trying to get you there. It's trying to point you there. And same with prayer. Like you said, you can pray and be thinking about something else. But prayer is trying to get you there. It's trying to take this thing and point it somewhere else, your attention. It's like,
So maybe it should be divided in techniques.
yeah, this still needs work. This still needs work.
Because I think you can classify activities then as purely meditative or aiding you to getting into a state of meditation.
Yes, definitely.
So lighting incense wouldn't be meditation, but it would be part of creating the ecosystem for it.
Yes, that's right.
I can see that table getting very complicated very quickly.
Psychic development. I know that you're welcome to make fun of me for that. But I love psychic developments.
Well, you always know what questions I'm going to ask about.
That I've read a few psychic development books. Developing your sixth sense. You know, these kinds of things. They're all based on meditation. I guess they're implicit. They're implicit. I'm sorry, so that should actually go into because they're not called meditation. You're doing meditation without knowing it. They're all forms of meditation. So a psychic development exercise, feel free to make fun of me, one's called visualization. You know, not data visualization, but visualization. So it starts to get a little bit more complicated. What I didn't mention is another form of meditation is taking this noise, the noisy language inside your mind, and replacing it with structure, something that is structured, like counting sheep, right? You've heard this expression, oh, you can't sleep tonight? Count sheep. That's an implicit voluntary meditation exercise. You're taking this noise, you still are focused in your mind, but you're replacing it with something structured and healthy. I would also call that meditation, counting sheep. And the basis of psychic development, a lot of that is, okay, we're not going to bother trying to redirect your attention from your mind to senses. Some of it is. We are going to tell you to keep your attention on your mind, but we're going to take that what's in your mind and structure it. So one psychic development exercise is, it's getting really funny, but to imagine or visualize different colored balloons. You know, you're holding the colored balloons. You release them one at a time. First the yellow one, the rainbow color map. You know, and you release a balloon corresponding to each color on the rainbow color map, one at a time. And doing that only in your imagination. That's a psychic development exercise, but it's also an implicit meditation. And they're difficult. Those psychic development exercises are difficult because they require you to focus and don't let the involuntary thoughts creep back in, because that's what happens in the psychic development exercises too. You're trying to visualize a yellow balloon as it floats away, and then the involuntary thoughts come back in. So it's a practice. You practice how long can I meditate uninterrupted for. So a master can probably do it for a whole hour or something like that. We should stop because it's a long time now. I just mentioned one more thing. I happen to like this because it also helps me sleep. So I'm sure everybody in this room has said, it's time to go to bed. You hit the cushion and you're not falling asleep because of all of your involuntary thoughts. You're worried about something in the future or
That's the
the
main
past.
reason I got into this stuff. I couldn't sleep.
Yeah. So I use meditation to help me sleep, and it's there are lots of different ways to do it. But I literally experience this pretty often. I lay down on the sheet. I'm worried. I can't sleep, and then I said, okay, I'm going to start meditating. More like a psychic development exercise. You can do sensory. Of course, you can do sensory meditation in your while you're lying down too. And then I just know, okay, if like I will take, for example, 30 breaths in and 30 breaths out and focus all my attention on it. It's a practice. I could do another visible lunch on actual meditation exercises so you can actually do them. But by the time I'm done, I'm asleep. So I can literally, not always, because I'm not a master, but sometimes I can literally just switch off my mind, meditate, and fall asleep. And it actually works. Like, that's healthy. It's very healthy. And it is literally just redirecting from the noise to something else, to something structured. And that's like a killer app. Like that's a great skill. It doesn't always work, by the way. I could keep going here, by the way. There's some music that tries to get you like in the meditative, to help you facilitate meditation. So that will be like a different visible lunch to try to get this thing like proper. Any other questions?
I just there was a program that I had. It's quite the opposite regarding the sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
There was a writer. She writes novel to help people like to sleep.
Okay.
But the idea is, it's quite strange. It tries to not finish the book. So it's to start with excitement, then the story gets long and long, and
boring.
hopefully you will not reach the end, and you'll fall asleep before reaching the end of the story. So there was she was explaining how does she do that. It's quite the opposite. Like she tried to disengage from the story rather than focusing on the story itself. Now I'm to explain it further.
Yeah, I mean, I have there's a lot that could be said about that, but there are a few things that could happen if you're reading a story. One is, if you consider it from a mind point of view, you're replacing the noise of your involuntary thoughts with the content of the story. That's helpful. That will help you fall asleep, and that's one of the reasons, like, parents read to their kids, right, to help them fall asleep. That's one of the reasons. Another nice property, though, is if you're reading out loud, you're taking some of your attention and you're dedicating it towards the senses. Like the mouth, your body, and sound. And your vision, too, if you're the one that's doing the reading. So that's a nice property. And that all points in that direction of meditation. It has a calming effect. the next level, it's another meditation exercise, is can you pay attention to the gap in between the words, or the silence in between the words? That's another meditation. And some people are so good at reading that listening to them is meditation, because they if you slow down your reading or your speech, you must pay attention to the silence between words. That is a meditation right there. So that's like the next level. And you can find people that are very good at this. You listen to them. They also put a space between the words, and immediately you're more relaxed. Okay, we'll stop. It's getting too long. Like this.